Today's setting is the spectacular and at times dangerous Aztec or Mexica Empire before its collapse after contact with Spanish conquistadors. This is a story of the rivalry and war which broke out between the cities of Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco in the 1470s. An often claimed casus belli of this war is one woman. She is the sister of an emperor and married to a king. While today's episode nominally centers on the life of an Aztec queen, how she is portrayed in myths is vastly different from the real and semi-tragic figure in life. In the myths, she is a vile murderer and adulteress. In historical chronicles, she is the possible victim of her husband's insults and abuse. Her name was Noble Jadestone Doll. She is a princess of Tenochtitlan and the queen consort of Tlatelolco. Her story, both in reality and myth, are fascinating parallels in how one life can be portrayed and affect popular memory. Happy Halloween, dear travelers, and welcome to Historical Detour. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Consider pledging to my Patreon. Quick content warning, as there are many adult themes and violence. Before relaying the legendary and historical versions of the Noble Jadestone Doll story, I will briefly cover what details remain broadly the same in both versions of events. Noble Jadestone Doll was a member of one of the most prominent lines of Mexica nobility. As a noblewoman of such rank, she had unparalleled luxuries and exceptional educational opportunities. She had remarkable privileges by the standards of almost any time period. By adulthood, she was married to Moquihui, the ruler of the city of Tlatelolco. While her date of birth is uncertain, the Mexica tended to wait for women to marry in their late teens or early 20s. She at some point would bear a son named Axayaca during the marriage. Her son was named for her brother, who became emperor of the Mexica in 1469. Her marriage to Moquihui was likely made to secure or strengthen an alliance with the city of Tlatelolco. The city's proximity to Tenochtitlan made it not only a vital trade partner, but at times a rival, as the rulers of Tenochtitlan sought to tighten and expand their influence in the region. I shall cover the diverging narratives, starting with the Noble Jadestone Doll of legend. The legendary depiction of Noble Jadestone Doll begins with her marriage to Moquihui. While Mexica noblemen could take multiple concubines at once, they would often have one wife who was to be elevated and acknowledged above all others. This was to be the role of Noble Jadestone Doll due to her pedigree and influence of her relatives. While Mexican noblemen could take multiple partners, the same was not true for wives. Adultery on the part of a wife could be met with execution. Moquihui in this version, though a doting husband, permitted his wife to live in her own separate residence. Jadestone Doll would soon take multiple paramours clandestinely with the aid of personal servants. The servants would procure these men for these dalliances. However, in order to ensure information or rumors of her affairs never made it to her husband's ears, Jadestone Doll had the men murdered. She could not risk the bodies being discovered, so she ordered each corpse be made into a freshly crafted statue that represented deities of the pantheon of the gods worshipped by the Mexica. However, tiring of this practice, Jadestone Doll selected 3 favored men to be kept alive to attend her. Eventually, Moquihui uncovered the affair. He discovered that one of her lovers wore jewelry which belonged to his wife. Additionally, he supposedly found one of the human statues in bed. And finally, he actually caught his wife in the act with her paramours. Moquihui's retribution was swift and brutal. Jadestone Doll, her lovers, and accomplice servants were publicly garroted. Incensed at the execution of his sister, the recently enthroned Tlatoani of Tenochtitlan, Axayacatl, went to war with his brother-in-law, Moquihui. Now we move on to the historical version of these events. Unfortunately, the sources for the historical Noble Jadestone Doll and the events thereof are quite limited. The Mexica or Aztec histories which cover these events closely have been destroyed or lost. Instead, later Spanish or Mestizo history writers are some of the modern sources scholars can draw upon for an outline of the real events. However, these sources likely drew from earlier contemporary native accounts. It can be summarized that the historic accounts betrayed an anti-Moquihui bias and pro-Tenochtitlan narrative, and their reliability is questionable. Historical versions portray Moquihui as a duplicitous schemer. A codex written by Domingo Francisco, a 17th century Nahua chronicler, is the source that puts the most emphasis on Noble Jadestone Doll's marriage in increasing the tensions between the two cities. According to this account, despite Noble Jadestone Doll bearing Mokwihui a son and being presumably faithful, Mokwihui physically abused Noble Jadestone Doll and did not treat her as his primary consort. To add insult to injury, when Axayacatl sent gifts to his sister, Mokwihui gave them instead to his concubines. Noble Jadestone Doll eventually supposedly fled back to her brother. He was incensed at his sister's treatment, and reportedly Jadestone Doll forewarned her brother of Mokwihui's plans for war. While the details of the turbulence in Mokwihui and Noble Jadestone Doll's marriage is uncertain, the war between the city-states of Tenochtitlan and Tlatelolco that resulted from this supposed domestic drama was a pivotal event in Mexica history. This would be a war for the control of the Mexica heartland. Though popularly known simply as a centralized empire, the Aztec or Mexica Empire was in fact a hegemonic alliance of three city-states for a significant portion of its history. Albeit the rulers of Tenochtitlan assumed more political and military authority as time went on. Though not a part of the Triple Alliance, Tlatelolco rivaled them in prestige and influence. This was a state of affairs that the ambitious Emperor Axayacatl could no longer tolerate when he assumed the imperial throne in 1469. Axayacatl sought to gain control over Tlatelolco and remove its semi-independent line of kings. Though Mokwihui was his brother-in-law, Axayacatl would wage war against the city-state early in his reign. The pretexts Axayacatl utilized to excuse the invasion were likely either heavily exaggerated or fabricated. Mokwihui was likely not entirely innocent either, however, as he reportedly made preparations for war. The two rulers and cities wished to settle once and for all who truly ruled the Mexica heartland. There are at least three primary sources for the war which occurred between these two cities. These are found in the accounts of Diego Duran, the Codex Mendoza, and the previously mentioned Codex of Domingo Francisco. How long the war lasted and who struck first is difficult to say, but it likely lasted several months in either 1472 or 1473. Mokwihui's army supposedly attempted a surprise assault on Tenochtitlan but failed in the war's opening. A number of open battles were fought outside both cities. The Mexica waged war to capture captives for ritual sacrifice rather than wholesale slaughter. However, Mokwihui's armies gradually took the worst of the fighting. The final battle was fought inside Tlatelolco itself, including its massive market square and great temple. Civilian women and children aided in the resistance, flinging all manner of projectiles at the attackers. Despite the fierce resistance, Mokwihui would die at the city's largest temple. Whether he was slain in battle or used as a sacrifice before being tossed down onto its stone steps is not clear. In the aftermath, Tenochtitlan essentially annexed Tlatelolco. A compliant new ruler was installed, and many privileges enjoyed by the conquered city were removed. Jadestone Doll was taken into the household of her brother once again, and she makes no further appearance in the historical record. The legendary version of Noble Jadestone's life, with several alterations, is covered in the 1980 best-selling historical novel Aztec by Gary Jennings. While a fictional work, authentic historical figures, events, and legends litter its pages. The terrifying legend of Noble Jadestone Doll plays out for a significant subplot, although it's not a focus for long. This video's purpose has not been to merely relay the terrifying legend for Halloween, but to examine the truth of a woman obscured by legend.